VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us today here on Crosstalk. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the government shutdown is due to the failures of Obamacare. Failures of Obamacare to delivering on lowering the cost of health care. And so health care costs are skyrocketing. And many politicians held out on reopening government to try and force taxpayers to pay for these extra subsidies to make the cost lower for certain individuals. I'd like to read you a portion of a column from Mark Tapscott at the Washington Stand when he says this. When Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer opted to force the October 1 shutdown of the federal government to protect Biden-era Affordable Care Act tax subsidies, he doubtless saw himself as saving the government health care program informally, being former President Barack Obama's name. Instead, when the longest federal shutdown in history wrought coast-to-coast commercial airline service chaos, left federal civil service unpaid for weeks, and jeopardized federal food benefits for legions of poor and lower-middle-class Americans, Schumer's decision put an unprecedented national spotlight on the reality of Obamacare's many failures. Perhaps, ladies and gentlemen, you remember hearing the promises such as, "You can keep your plan." Well, this marks millions of people lost their plan. We were told you can keep your doctor. Yet over 200,000 doctors opted out of the Obamacare exchange plans. We were told your premiums will go down by $2,500, yet it's being reported premiums increased by about 60% in the first 4 years and continue to skyrocket. Other promises also made that never came to pass. Well, on Crosstalk, we often address issues not covered by the legacy media, but we do keep you informed of what so much of the media does not want you to know. Last week, Thursday of last week, Senator Ron Johnson, who's chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, held a hearing entitled Assessing the Damage Done by Obamacare. Did you hear about it? Well, there were 4 witnesses that testified on Obamacare's failures to lower the cost and to meet coverage goals, and we're going to be bringing you their testimony today. But first, the introductory remarks by Senator Ron Johnson.
I want to welcome and thank everybody for attending today's hearing titled Assessing the Damage Done by Obamacare. I want to especially thank the witnesses for the time and effort you put into coming here. I know we've got one of the witnesses took a red eye in. We ought to run a poll on the audience, see if you can identify who that person was. I'm not going to blow it. But again, thank you so much for your time and effort. Even before Obamacare was implemented, President Obama's repeated promise that if you like your doctor and health plan, you could keep them, was labeled PolitiFact's 2013 Lie of the Year. In a recent column, the Washington Post stated, quote, "The real problem is that the Affordable Care Act was never actually affordable." Today's witnesses will provide the gory details of exactly how unaffordable and damaging the signature legislation of President Obama and the Democrat Party has been. I've asked our 3 majority witnesses to each address a specific area where the damage has occurred. Our first witness, Joel White, will describe how further expansion of the third-party payer system under Obamacare has led to greater consolidation within all sectors of the healthcare industry, dramatically reducing competition and driving up costs. Our second witness, Taryn Bragdon, will describe the damage done to Medicaid and those who Medicaid was originally designed to help. Our third witness, Brian Blaze, will detail how the insurance market for individuals was dismantled and replaced by the Rube Goldberg Obamacare marketplace exchanges that, contrary to President Obama's promise of lowering family premiums by $2,500 a year, have caused premiums and deductibles to skyrocket. The witness for the minority, Shannon Verstegen, is a fellow Wisconsinite who I have a great deal of sympathy for. She is a victim of Obamacare's skyrocketing premiums and the limitations on small employers joining association plans, thereby forcing their employees onto the unaffordable exchanges. In Wisconsin, Obamacare exchange plans have increased 3.3 times the rate of inflation since 2013, whereas employer-sponsored insurance has risen at 1.6 times the rate. As a result, Ms. Verstegen's premium is more than $5,000 higher because of Obamacare. And if you compare it against inflation rate, that's about $7,500 higher than it probably should have been had we actually controlled costs with a health care plan. Today's hearing will highlight Obamacare's failure to meet its objectives. In March 2010, CBO score used to pass Obamacare, it projected it would reduce deficits by $143 billion over 10 years and reduce the number of uninsured by 32 million by 2019. In 2013, the year before Obamacare implementation, 55 million Americans were enrolled in Medicaid. By 2019, that figure had increased by 17 million to 72 million, with Medicaid expansion accounting for 19 million of that total. That means enrollment in traditional Medicaid actually decreased by 2 million individuals over that time period. I know it's a lot of numbers. There's more to come. There were 12 million people enrolled in the individual market in 2013 and 14 million enrolled in Obamacare marketplace exchanges in 2019 for a net gain of 2 million. So you add that 2 million to the 17 million added to Medicaid, and the net reduction of uninsured due to the implementation of Obamacare was 19 million by 2019, only 59% of the 32 million originally projected by CBO. So first lesson there is kind of ignore CBO scores. They're not that accurate. Comparing 2025 to 2013, there are now 22 million more people enrolled in Medicaid and 12 million more enrolled on the individual exchanges, indicating a 34 million increase in enrollment. But wait, what is unknown, however, is how many illegal immigrants are included in the enrollment figures and how many phantom policies have been written for people who don't know they were enrolled and as a result make no claims. One estimate for 2023 puts the number of non-citizens enrolled in Medicaid alone at roughly 4.6 million. Addressing phantom policies on the exchanges, Brian Blaze will testify that in, quote, in 2025, improper enrollment in fully subsidized plans reached 6.4 million people, with associated improper federal spending exceeding $27 billion. So that's 11 million of the 34 million that should not be enrolled or maybe don't even exist. Obamacare is spread over multiple programs and agencies that have failed to adequately segregate its differentiated costs. So it's impossible to compare its actual impact on federal deficits versus CBO's March 2010 score. But I doubt many would argue that Obamacare actually reduced the deficit. We can, however, look at various spending components to get some sense of how it failed fiscally. Now, these two charts, and I'll just describe them. What we have is state-by-state comparison to 2013 premiums versus 2026. And you're seeing the percent increase. The red line shows the 39% increase in the CPI. So inflation went up 39%, but you can see on the individual exchanges, the average number of all those state increases was 169%, 4.3 times the rate of inflation. Compare that to employer-sponsored plans, which weren't affected as much by Obamacare, but there's also no reason that they should have increased at 1.9 times the rate of inflation. I mean, there's no reason for healthcare costs to be running this much higher than inflation. But again, you can see the exchanges are far worse than the inflation or the premium increases in the employer-sponsored plans. You can take those down. Federal spending on Medicaid has skyrocketed from $265 billion in fiscal year 2013 to $669 billion projected for fiscal year 2025. The cost of subsidies on the individual exchanges is projected to be $129 billion for fiscal year 2025, with the cost of the temporary pandemic-enhanced subsidies accounting for $20 billion of that total. The federal government takeover of the student loan program was supposed to help pay for Obamacare by reducing the deficit by $19 billion. Instead, there's been an additional $620 billion spent on debt cancellations and Biden administration's income-driven repayment. So instead of saving $19 billion, we spent $620 billion taking over student loans. Now, unfortunately, instead of acknowledging all the damage done by the faulty design of Obamacare and working in good faith with Republicans to repair it, Democrats simply want to spend hundreds of billions of dollars more in their attempt to continue to hide its failure. Extending the enhanced subsidies, the temporary subsidies Democrats designed to expire this year, not Republicans, Democrats set these to expire this year, would cost $350 billion over 10 years, plus an additional $60 billion in debt servicing costs. Lowering the health care costs and providing more American citizens with affordable insurance and covering individuals with pre-existing conditions are goals we all share. Unfortunately, Obamacare failed miserably at lowering costs and meeting enrollment goals. Accomplishing those goals could have been done by understanding and relying upon the benefits of consumerism and free market competition. By relying on those principles and returning to free choice for Americans, we can repair the damage done by Obamacare and transition to a health care system that actually works.
Senator Ron Johnson, as he made opening remarks at the Senate hearing assessing the damage done by Obamacare. Now, we're going to play a couple excerpts from Senator Richard Blumenthal, who is the ranking member on this committee as well. And here are some of the things that he had to say. This, of course, in opposition to Senator Ron Johnson.
Let's be very clear why we're here. It is a Republican effort to destroy the Affordable Care Act. We are seeking to extend the health care tax credits past the end of the year. They make health care insurance affordable for millions of Americans who are right now going to the exchanges and trying to determine whether they can afford insurance. A commitment, an agreement, a guarantee that those tax credits will be extended will enable reopening the government. But that issue is not what brings us here today. It is a broader, relentless, calculated campaign to repeal the law that underlies those tax credits, to destroy the ACA and take away health care insurance from millions and millions of Americans who have come to rely on it. 15 years ago, Congress passed the Affordable Care Act, literally life-saving legislation that made health care accessible for millions of Americans and guaranteed coverage for millions more who suffered from the so-called pre-existing conditions that insurance companies use as a pretext to deny coverage. It made insurance available for millions of small business people, farmers, and others who are self-employed. It made health care accessible to children who otherwise would break bones or get sick and have no accessible health care. And it lowered the costs of insurance for millions. Ever since then,
Tell you what, we're going to pause right there, and we'll pick up with this more of this here in just after the break. And it's very interesting how he used the term more accessible, but really stayed away from using the term more affordable, because all of us have seen what has happened to health insurance rates. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation seminar speaker with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, during Creation Week, what kinds of fish were created?
Chris, the Bible says God created each of the animals after their kind. It says on day 5 of Creation Week that the fish were the first truly living creature that he created. This was the first use of the term living. On day 3, he had created plants, but these are never in Scripture referred to as living in the sense that they had blood or the breath of life. Plants are biologically alive, of course, but not living in the sense of having consciousness. On day 5, however, the Bible says that the oceans were literally teeming with life. Each basic type of fish was created at that point. Since that time, a lot of varieties, say of the cod or the bass or the sharks, have arisen, but no new basic kinds. God created all things after their kind, back in Genesis.
For more information, visit our website at icr.org.
listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. November 6th is when this happened, a Senate hearing assessing the damage done by Obamacare. And again, that's what so much of the shutdown was over, is that we need to extend these subsidies, okay? Because, it's not Affordable Care Act, okay? The costs have gone through the roof. And we're going to continue on with a statement here by Senator Blumenthal, who is a ranking member. That means he leads the Democratic portion of the aisle as it relates to this committee.
Ever since then, Republicans have been trying to destroy it. They sought to destroy it through more than 60 votes within a few years of its passage, and failed every time. But they came close. I am haunted by a moment, one of the most moving and momentous moments in my time in the United States Senate, when a single vote prevented the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. It was John McCain's vote when he famously went to the well of the United States Senate as the last one of us to vote, and he gave that famous thumbs down with his still handicapped arm. That moment lives with us.
Senator Blumenthal went on with further comments here.
It has soared in popularity. It turns out that Americans really like having access to affordable health care, and the ACA is more popular than ever. This hearing is part of an increasingly isolated and aberrant movement within the Republican Party itself to continue the effort to repeal affordable health care.
Okay, he went on. As a matter of fact, there were some heated words between him and Senator Ron Johnson for the amount of time and extra witness that he brought into the agreed-upon format there. Nonetheless, they brought in witnesses, and Senator Johnson will introduce the first witness here, Joel White, but has more of his background here. Let's listen in.
Our first witness is Mr. Joel White. Mr. White is the president of the Council for Affordable Health Coverage. For over 2 decades, he has worked to advance numerous health care reforms and has led various issue campaigns to lower health care costs and promote health care transparency. He holds a Bachelor of Science from American University. Mr. White.
Thank you, Senators, and appreciate the opportunity to testify today. As you mentioned, I'm the president of the Council for Affordable Health Coverage. It's a broad-based alliance with a singular mission, which is bringing down the cost of health care for all Americans so they have access to affordable coverage. And I'm here to say that Obamacare isn't working for working Americans. It fails the affordability test, and it needs major surgery from Congress to get back on the right path. The law was passed in 2010 with exchange plans available in 2014. As a result of the ACA, there's far less competition and choice, and that is hurting consumers. Many more are covered now, but premiums and deductibles are through the roof. Obamacare put rocket fuel on medical inflation, and we're all paying the price. Rich subsidies have encouraged small businesses to drop more robust coverage, sending about 12 million people, or about half of all exchange enrollees, into the Obamacare market. There, they're paying deductibles that are twice as high, in some cases 3 times as high, higher premiums, and have less access to doctors and drugs. We are subsidizing inferior coverage through incentives created by this law. Why is this happening? A big reason is that Obamacare drove consolidation. It triggered an arms race to consolidate in insurance markets and hospital markets, and that is driving up costs in the market and leaving consumers with fewer choices. The ACA's core design requires consumers to purchase comprehensive and expensive plans in order to access the subsidies you talked about, Senator, and that those then lower premiums. The law regulates who can buy and sell what and where, and then offers those incentives to purchase the most expensive plans available on the market. This reduced competition in insurance markets as plans struggled to entice consumers. Many insurers simply left. So just a brief history here, the Government Accountability Office found that private health insurance markets massively consolidated after enactment of the law. In the number of insurers per state decreased from 30 insurers in 2011 before the law was enacted to 4 in 2020. Small businesses options also decreased. By 2018, more than half of U.S. counties on the federal platform only had one insurer. That is not a choice. This consolidation increased premiums and deductibles and reduced those options. But after a deregulatory effort under the first Trump administration, insurers re-entered the market. This led to the first decrease ever in benchmark premiums in the history of the program. And then state-based waivers allowed 20 states to better tailor the market to meet the needs of their consumers. That included a very successful program in the state of Wisconsin, Mr. Chairman, that lowered premiums by 10% and encouraged multiple insurers back into the market. By 2023, as a result of these deregulatory efforts, we had 6 marketplace insurers on average, up from 4 in 2020. But despite more logos on paper, county-level markets remain very concentrated. In many areas, 2 insurers hold 70% of the market. And of course, insurers offer coverage that pays for health care. And here the ACA created the context for massive acceleration in market concentration and power through 340B reforms and value-based care models that reward big institutions and big scale. In 2010, 80% of hospital areas were already highly concentrated. Today, 97% of markets are uncompetitive. This caused prices for hospitals to increase by 15 to 30%. And these costs flow through to the premiums, and they're the primary driver of the premiums and the 26% increase we're seeing next year. Basically, the ACA led to a system of localized monopolies, and that drove up premiums. Between 2013 and 2019, premiums increased 151%. As you indicated, Mr. Chairman, that's far faster than in employer plans and in just regular medical inflation. But the outrage, I think, is in deductibles. Deductibles in Obamacare have doubled since the law was enacted and are now 2 times higher than HSAs and 3 times higher than employer markets. Some deductibles we're seeing next year are $10,000, $14,000, $15,000 a year. That is not affordable for the typical American or the typical American family. I would call ACA plans outliers. They're inferior to most coverage on the market, and they're much more expensive for the average consumer. To sum up, in ACA markets, we no longer see affordable coverage. That's largely being driven by medical costs and the regulatory flaws in the law that are driving less choices for consumer, higher premiums, and higher deductibles. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today.
Our next witness will be Mr. Taryn Bragdon. Mr. Bragdon is President and Chief Executive Officer at the Foundation for Government Accountability, which he founded in 2011 to advance free market principles. He previously served in the Maine House of Representatives from 1996 to 2000. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Maine and Master of Science in Business from, Hudson University? Mr. Bragdon.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. 6 decades ago, Medicaid was created for the truly needy: children, seniors, pregnant women, and individuals with disabilities and poverty. And for 5 decades, that remained mostly true. And then the Affordable Care Act radically changed that. Obamacare expanded Medicaid to a new class: able-bodied adults, roughly 70% of whom are childless. More than 60% self-report they don't work at all, and most are men. Today, there are more able-bodied adults, nearly 40 million, on Medicaid than any other group. For every senior on Medicaid, there are almost 5 able-bodied adults, more than 4 for every disabled person on Medicaid, and more adults than children. And even though elderly and disabled Americans are more than 3 times more expensive to cover, taxpayers spend more in total for able-bodied adults on Medicaid. In the first decade of Medicaid expansion, the program cost taxpayers more than $1 trillion, which was twice as much as originally estimated. Meanwhile, as that's happened, 700,000 Americans with intellectual and physical disabilities are stuck on Medicaid home and community waiting lists, while Obamacare's able-bodied adults are always at the front of the line. Imagine three people: the most physically disabled person you ever met, an impoverished elderly grandmother with severe dementia in a nursing home, and an able-bodied 20-something-year-old man who chooses not to work. Thanks to Medicaid expansion, for every dollar states spend on that 20-something-year-old man, they'll get $9 in federal match. But for that severely disabled person or that frail elderly grandmother, for every dollar a state spends, the federal government will only match about $1.30. That 90% Obamacare match perversely means that in tough times, when states have to cut back, for every dollar they cut from that 20-something-year-old man, the state will only save 10 cents. But for every dollar they cut from the elderly or disabled, the state will save 43 cents of their share of the spending. Meanwhile, Medicaid expenditures for illegal aliens have also skyrocketed through a whole variety of categories: emergency services, qualified alien, or lawfully residing status, as well as through state-funded programs like in California, or by using loopholes like reasonable opportunity periods. In fact, the number of individuals applying and receiving Medicaid coverage through a reasonable opportunity period who were unable to prove their citizenship skyrocketed 400% during the Biden administration. And what's worse is states have taken advantage of abusive money laundering schemes under the guise of so-called things like provider taxes, state-directed payments, or intergovernmental transfers to bankroll even more expenditures for expansion adults and illegal aliens. Provider taxes allow states to draw down even more federal funds with little or no skin in the game. And while state-directed payments reward politically connected providers with Medicaid reimbursement rates sometimes above commercial rates. And despite it all, rural hospitals are in shambles. Medicaid expansion has crowded countless Americans out of private coverage, and if the remaining 10 non-expansion states were to decide to expand, it would push almost 6 million more adults from private coverage onto Medicaid. So as a result, in the first 8 years of Obamacare, hospitals' profits fell by 2/3 in Medicaid expansion states, and more than 70 hospitals have closed in those expansion states since 2014. That's why the big, beautiful bill, under which Medicaid spending is still growing by 33% over the next decade, created common sense Medicaid work requirements for these able-bodied adults. It addressed the abusive provider taxes and state-directed payments, closed loopholes that allowed coverage for illegal aliens, as well as created a $50 billion rural health reinvestment fund while cracking down on fraud, waste, and abuse. Obamacare's Medicaid expansion has left a trail of fiscal destruction. It's prioritized able-bodied adults over the truly needy, elderly, and disabled, and it rewards money laundering by states. That's costly and wrong. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
We're going to pick up with just a couple more testimonies that were given at this hearing on November the 6th, assessing the damage done by Obamacare. And friends, really, is this what this government shutdown has been all about, is to increase, rather to put out those subsidies, to enhance subsidies that came under the Biden administration? We'll be back in 1 minute with more testimony. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
Ever thought you're too old to impact this generation? The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry is a powerful 95-minute dramatic film depicting a 75-year-old man living in the year 1970 in a small town. Jonathan Sperry befriends 3 12-year-old boys to motivate them to read their Bible and follow the Lord. He spends time with them, teaches important life lessons, and impacts their lives for eternity. The greatest challenge, however, is dealing with the town bully who is influenced in a remarkable way. The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry is an inspiring story that will challenge both young and old, and is available on DVD for a donation of $13 by calling 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829. The Secrets of Jonathan Sperry. What he teaches will last forever.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America, and bringing to you a Senate hearing that was held on November the 6th. Senator Ron Johnson put together this hearing, and it was entitled Assessing the Damage Done by Obamacare. And there is much damage, and the costs have skyrocketed that have not only for insurance premiums, but in health care itself. 15 years ago, this was passed. Remember, Nancy Pelosi will play the clip later, Lord willing, if we need to pass it so we find out what's in it. Well, we're hearing now on the fallout of Obamacare as well, as this hearing was held. Has not had a lot of coverage in legacy media, but bringing you these testimonies here today on Crosstalk. We've got two more that will air this segment. We'll give you an opportunity to chime in here at the final segment as well. Here's Senator Ron Johnson.
Our next witness is Dr. Brian Blaze. Dr. Blaze is the president of the Paragon Health Institute. From 2017 to 2019, he served as a special assistant to the president for economic policy at the White House's National Economic Council, where he coordinated the development and execution of numerous health policies. He received a PhD in economics from George Mason University. Mr. Blaze, Dr. Blaze.
Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Because of a lack of options, my family with 5 children has been enrolled on an ACA plan for 4 years, so I've seen firsthand the real problems with the law. All government policies create winners and losers. Unfortunately, the Affordable Care Act created far more losers than winners. The ACA promised affordable, high-quality insurance, and it failed to deliver. Millions of people lost health plans they liked. Millions of families faced massive premium and deductible increases for worse coverage that included fewer doctors and hospitals. The ACA significantly contributes to rising deficits and unsustainable debt, leaving young families, their children, and future generations with higher taxes and inflation. The law entrenched an inefficient, insurance-dominated health sector with massive subsidies flowing straight from the Treasury to health insurance companies. Here are the basic economics. The ACA's regulations increased premiums for most people to decrease them for a small number. Subsidies were then needed so people could afford coverage that the government regulations had made more expensive. The underlying regulatory and subsidy structure leads to ever-escalating premiums and prices. Higher premiums create pressure for still more subsidies. And those additional subsidies only worsen the underlying problems, fueling the very premiums and price escalation they were meant to offset. If Congress wants to make health care more affordable, it must reform the structure itself, not throw good money after bad. In 2014, when the ACA's key provisions took effect, individual market premiums rose nearly 50%. From 2014 to 2016, premiums increased nearly twice as rapidly as employer plan premiums. The ACA's subsidies are ill-designed and inflationary. The enrollee's share of the premium is capped, regardless of the total premium. Because enrollees pay only a small slice of the premium, insurers face virtually no price discipline, giving them incentives to inflate costs rather than improve value. The ACA regulations drove higher costs. For example, under the medical loss ratio, insurers must spend a minimum share of premium revenue on medical claims. In other words, to increase profits, insurers must raise premiums. The ACA's essential health benefit mandates requires all plans to cover the same set of services regardless of what consumers want or need. These rules increased wasteful spending and premiums. COVID-era subsidy boosts resulted in fully subsidized coverage and led to massive fraud in the program. In 2025, there are 6.4 million people enrolled in fully subsidized plans who are not eligible, costing $27 billion. In 15 states, there are more than twice as many enrollees in fully subsidized plans than are eligible. Many of these enrollees were signed up without their knowledge or consent, victims of massive fraud schemes. A staggering 40% of fully subsidized enrollees used no medical services in 2024. Many of these zero-claim enrollees are phantoms. Federal taxpayers sent more than $35 billion to insurers for people who did not use their plan a single time. The ACA's subsidy structure, particularly with the COVID credits, incentivized small employers to drop coverage. The percentage of small employers offering a health plan has dropped by 1/3 since 2010. The ACA has also led some state and local governments to drop retiree health coverage, offloading that expense onto the federal taxpayer. The COVID credits, by lifting the subsidy cap at 4 times the federal poverty level, encourage early retirement. It has led to situations like a retired couple in their mid-50s who earn $136,000 in pension income from government service, receiving $15,000 in ACA subsidies. ACA premiums will rise next year because of underlying flaws in the program. Only a small portion of the increase is from the expiring COVID credits. The underlying ACA subsidies provide enormous protection for more than 93% of enrollees from high premiums. Most will pay less than $80 a month for a plan next year, with the federal taxpayer picking up 80% of the premium cost and a higher percentage for lower-income enrollees. The Inflation Reduction Act set the COVID credits to expire after 2025, and they should end. Continuing them would exacerbate fraud, increase premiums and healthcare prices, drive out alternative financing arrangements, remove the imperative to reform this failing program, and drive the country deeper in debt. Real reform does not mean spending more taxpayer money. It means giving consumers the freedom to choose the coverage and care that best meets their needs. Thank you.
You see, friends, as we're listening to this testimony that took place November 6th, assessing the damage done by Obamacare, I mean, we are learning that there's just no limits on as far as escalating the costs for medical care or for the insurance premiums themselves. If the government's footing the bill, now keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, you and I are the government, okay? It is us who are paying for these massive subsidies that have been taking place. Now, I'm going to be sharing one last piece of testimony, and this came at the request of Ranking Member Blumenthal, Shanna Verstappen, and we find, according to Ron Johnson, as he said at the very beginning, this fourth witness is really a victim of Obamacare soaring premiums and perverse incentives, causing employers to drop coverage and force their employers onto these unaffordable exchanges. Here's that final testimony that took place.
Our final witness is Ms. Shauna Verstappen. Ms. Verstappen is the fitness director at Supreme Health and Fitness, a small gym located in Madison, Wisconsin. She and her family receive health coverage through the ACA marketplace. She received a degree in kinesiology. I actually tried to
kinesiology.
Figure it out, but I'll let you say it. Exercise science from the University of Wisconsin. Ms. Verstappen.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Senators, for the opportunity to share my family's story here today. My name is Shauna Verstappen, and I live in Madison, Wisconsin, with my husband and our 2 wonderful little boys, who are 7 and 10 years old. I'm a proud member of Moms Rising. I'm here today as a proud user of the Affordable Care Act and the healthcare marketplace. Like so many other working families, I don't know what my family would do without it. My husband and I both work in the fitness industry as trainers and group fitness instructors at a really wonderful small gym in Madison. We love our jobs, and we both work very hard helping others on a daily basis. We've both been employed there since high school, so almost 30 years. Due to the small number of full-time employees at our gym, the owners don't provide us with health insurance. So we purchased health coverage for our family through the ACA marketplace for many years. We currently are paying $460 each month for our family of 4. Without the enhanced premium tax credits, our premiums are projected to increase to an unaffordable $700 a month in 2026. Losing enhanced premium tax credit support would create a real crisis for my family. Trust me, we've already cut back on spending in every way we know, along with adding lots of additional work hours to both of our schedules. We rarely go out to eat. We haven't gone on a vacation in years. And for 2026, we're looking at scaling back some of our children's sports and other activities our kids enjoy. With the threat of the subsidy ending, we're exploring all of our options. My husband is even considering finding another job that offers employer-sponsored health coverage. That's been really emotional for us because although we're certainly not above working at a large realtor like Costco, it would mean setting aside the skills he went to college for and work that we truly love. We're also considering shopping for a cheaper plan, most likely with a higher deductible, but that's risky for our financial stability. We also did talk about not being covered at all, but with 2 kids, that didn't sound like a safe choice for our family. These options and decisions are tough and, quite frankly, really scary. We're a middle-class, healthy, hardworking family, and like so many others, we're struggling to make ends meet with the prices for food, housing, clothing, electricity, and everything else skyrocketing. The prospect of our health insurance premiums increasing by several $100s is devastating for us. It would be a major financial blow to my family. This truly doesn't feel like it's about politics or polling or winners or losers in Congress. Families like mine in every state, red states, blue states, everywhere in between, rely on the Affordable Care Act. This is about real families, real kids, and real health. Speaking of health, I grew up with a mother who had Huntington's disease, a devastating genetic neurological brain disorder. Living at risk of inheriting it myself, I spent years fearing that I would never be able to obtain health insurance. Although I ultimately tested negative for the disease, the Affordable Care Act gives me a peace of mind that I will be covered no matter what health challenge I or my family may face. Sadly, many in the Huntington's disease community who've become like family to me did not receive that same test result. At our state chapter convention last weekend in the Wisconsin Dells, there was so much to celebrate. Just over a month ago, new research identified a potential treatment, a really big moment of hope for our community. But that hope was shadowed by fear. Many families expressed deep concern that the Affordable Care Act may be overturned, and they may lose the access to the essential health care that they depend on. None of these individuals did anything to deserve the genetics they were dealt, and they too deserve affordable, reliable health care, just like every one of us. The Affordable Care Act is essential for entrepreneurs and small business employees like myself to afford health care coverage. The Affordable Care Act is essential for those with pre-existing conditions, like Huntington's disease, to afford health care coverage. The Affordable Care Act enhanced premium tax credits are essential for millions of Americans to be able to afford health care coverage. I am here as an example of the people who you all represent. I'm a working middle-class mom speaking for 24 million other Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act to keep their children healthy, their bills manageable, and their futures secure. I ask you sincerely and urgently to stand with us and support the families who need you now more than ever.
Those are the 4 witnesses that were brought in for this committee hearing assessing the damage done by Obamacare. We're going to take a quick break. If you would like to comment on this and the broken promises of Obamacare, how this has impacted you, our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Have you found healthcare to be more affordable? Have you found your premiums going down? The promises of Obamacare, if you wanted to keep your doctor, you can keep your doctor. You can keep your plan. Plans would go down by $2,500. 800-733-9829.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Last week on my radio broadcast, a young man from Michigan called in. His name is Drew. And he went on to describe how he's an attorney. So he's someone who's gone to college. He's gone to law school. He's someone that knows how to collect information and data together. But he said that he stumbled on our broadcast. I think he was providentially led to our broadcast. And there he heard me lay out the clear gospel, just what's in the Bible. And he believed and was saved. Then he laid out in a lengthy email to me over the weekend all the remarkable things the Lord has done for him, his children, his wife. But he thanked us because there are so many gospels out there, so many people that are adding to the gospel, taking away from the gospel, making the gospel so confusing. I hope this encourages you to preach what Jesus preached. All who desire may come. All. Preach the gospel to everyone. There are people eager to hear it. I'm Brandon House.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and again, we're playing the Senate hearing assessing the damage done by Obamacare. But friends, let me just take you back. One more brief clip, going back to March of 2010. This was Nancy Pelosi.
You've heard about the controversies within the bill, the process about the bill, one of the other items. But I don't know if you have heard that it is a legislation for the future. Not just about health care for America, but about a healthier America, where preventive care is not something that you have to pay a deductible for or out of pocket. That prevention. It's about diet, not diabetes. It's going to be very, very exciting. But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it away from the fog of the controversy.
Is the fog gone now? We have to pass it so you can find out what's in it. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Greg in Cincinnati, Ohio, you're on the air.
Brother Jim, Obama lied when he tried to say, you can keep your doctor, because I got to change mine, because Humana's not even using Mercy West as a primary care. I've got to go to somebody else. My doctor was Brandon Parr, and he's not one of their providers.
Yeah, I think, and we understand as many as 214,000 doctors opted out of participating in Obamacare. You could not keep your doctor. That was not a true claim.
No, it was not.
Yeah, thank you, Greg, for your comments. Let's go to Kathy in Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Hi. Here's a story about this. I get paid twice a month. One check covers my mortgage with a little bit left over. The other check has to cover everything else. My husband is disabled. My premium for next year is more than my mortgage payment.
My.
So how am I supposed to do anything? I'm obviously going to want to stay in my house. So,
and we were told that premiums would go down by $2,500.
Well, I actually work in the insurance field, and as soon as this started years ago, we all said, this is designed to implode.
Wow. It's imploding, and now we see, the leverage that they have attempted with this shutdown to keep it shut down because of they want to expand the subsidies that so many require. Otherwise, they're going to see their premiums go up.
And I don't agree with that, even though it sounds counterproductive for me, but we just need to get rid of this entire system and go back to the way it was. We had options for people who had major problems. We had the HRSA programs, health insurance risk sharing pools, and it was far, far cheaper than the regular Obamacare.
Kathy, thanks for your call. Let's go next to Jeff in Germantown. You're on the air.
Yeah, I appreciate the last clip you had where Nancy Pelosi was talking about how she didn't know what was in the bill. The fact of the matter is she didn't know what was in the bill because she didn't have anything to do with writing it. The people that wrote the bill were the Heritage Foundation, along with the insurance industry, and Newt Gingrich and the like. So I was a Republican at the time in the late 90s when the Republicans were first starting to peddle this garbage. And for that reason, I turned away from the Republican Party and supported Obama. Well, Obama gets a couple $100 million from the insurance industry because he campaigned against that bill. He gets a couple $100 million from the insurance industry, and a month into his presidency, he says, well, we need to set aside all those things that we fought for. So those like me that I literally worked for the Obama campaign because I was against the Affordable Care Act.
Wow.
And then he goes and passes it. So you imagine how outraged I am about the time I spent working for his campaign. And then he goes and passes the very bill, the very thing I was fighting against.
Thank you, Jeff.
Of course it's a mess.
Yeah.
They ended up eliminating the mandate that you buy health insurance. Well, I just don't. I don't have health insurance. I just don't go to the doctor. So,
Jeff, thanks for your call. Let's go to Dan next in Onalaska. You're on the air.
Yeah, thank you. An inventor, Buckminster Fuller, once said famously that instead of fighting against to change the paradigm, you need to create a totally new one and make the old one obsolete. Now, many people are spending a lot of money on self-care, purchasing vitamins, nutrients, and alternative health care protocols, therapies, but these aren't never provided in the hospital because they're all drug-based. So we need to create alternative health clinics that the public will support, like chelation therapy and oxygen baric therapy for strokes and all kinds of other nutrients and probiotic enzymes that you'll never get by the hospital franchise. And when the people begin to open up these clinics and fund them and get natural protocols that the hospital won't even recognize, then we can start having change, and then they will lower their prices because nobody will be going to them because people will wise up and take charge of their own health care and letting somebody else be in charge of them and saying, well, I just do what my doctor tells me. I can't do anything unless my doctor tells me because I'll get drug problems and interference, so I have to pay attention to the drugs. People, you are created by a holy God, a creator, and he provided all the things you need in the leaves and the plants
Dan,
and the enzymes and the probiotics.
Thank you, Dan. We got your point. Thank you very much. Let's go to another Dan in Delaware. You're on the air.
Hey there. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. So I appreciate the conversation here, and I want to say that Obamacare, I do not think is perfect. I think that the way they passed it was not exactly the right way. I think it was a step in the right direction. I think they caved to the insurance companies to a large extent. What I do hear missing from this conversation is the fact that you're very critical of Obamacare and things haven't lived up to their promises. But what I'm not hearing is that the Republicans have had 15 plus years to come up with an alternative, and they literally have not had one actual viable alternative other than to cancel Obamacare and then go back to a time when people I have a pre-existing condition, so thank God for Obamacare. But kids getting covered till they're 26. Pre-existing conditions getting covered. I mean, I would like to see an alternative if there is one, but I just haven't seen it from the Republicans. And I know, I agree that it's imperfect. I do, but I also think you need to sort of throw in there that there is no viable alternative from the other side. And until they do that, we should try to bolster it to the extent possible before we burn the whole house down.
Okay, well, and that's what's happening. And we're out of time here. The theme music is playing, but that's what's going on is the house is burning down. The subsidies have just gone through the roof. And certainly what we are paying, the insurance companies are getting bigger. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing. And certainly the plan that's been put into place and orchestrated here through Obamacare just is not working at all. Well, friends, thank you for joining us here today. We've run out of time. We wish we had more, but thank you for joining us here on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.